Kill the Indian, save the man. This is a quote by Richard Henry Pratt, who was a Civil War veteran, and he believed that Native children should be civilized through education. He kind of started the idea of boarding schools as a model for Native Americans, and this was pointed out at minute 10:30. Um, and this quote really stuck to me because it's really direct in the way that it's saying that the Indians should be, or the Native Americans should be taken, their identity should be taken, and they should be assimilated into what um the main be in this case being an American and a standardized American. So this quote really frames the central idea of what the We Will Speak documentary is really about, and how education and really the forced education was used as a way to assimilate Native Americans, and in this case the Cherokee people, and taking away and stripping their identity and the language and culture as a whole. Um, Around the first couple minutes of the documentary, um, starts off at minute 9, where um, the grandparents in the documentary describe how they were sent to Indian schools, and how they felt that they were made to learn English. They were sent to large campuses, really being forced away from their families. Families generally have control. They didn't really have a choice, and they had to send their children to these boarding schools, or else, um, some of the people in the documentary describe how they didn't want their children to be tortured and abused by the quote unquote standardized American children. So there really wasn't a choice for many of these parents, and boarding schools were really the only option for many parents to send their children to. Um, and that's where these boarding schools came from, and missionaries began these boarding schools, and later on the government took control, as described, during, timestamp 12. Um, yes, and, it was described as, Cherokee being really tolerant, and accepting of these boarding schools, instead of rejecting the idea and just not sending children to boarding schools. Um, they were really accepting, just tolerant overall, and, um it was kind of an attempt to save their children from the abuse, and, um, yeah, just the abuse that they would endure if these, parents hadn't sent their children to boarding schools, and overall, it just shows that the language suppression is sort of institutional, and, these boarding schools are a way for the younger generations to become assimilated to the English lifestyle, and how really language learning and the passage of the languages later on really starts at a young age, and these boarding schools are really a way to um kind of destroy and attempt to eradicate the Cherokee language and identity as a whole, because from these boarding schools, it wasn't just the language that was taken. They had to assimilate to the lifestyle and the overall way of life as a standard American. In the documentary shows pictures of Native Americans in these boarding schools with uniforms on, and their hair was cut to what they would describe as a standard way, and it really just shows that it wasn't just the language, but it was the culture and the identity, which is still seen today. Um, Kind of moving back to really why this is important. Um, From minutes 5 to 6, it kinda the children describe how, the childhood is really tied to the land and the family for the Cherokee people, and their sort of upbringing is really in a community rather than individualism, so the quote unquote, West, their sort of idea is really individualistic, especially in the United States, like, we're very individualistic. We are able to be independent, but the lifestyle of the Cherokee people are really tied within the community, and they like to be connected to their roots, the land especially, in Appalachia, and just as a community as a whole. And just learning Cherokee was difficult, and being able to learn Cherokee and just your ancestors' language or your grandparents' language as a whole, um, it's a way to speak to your ancestors and, just understand the perspective as, one people talk about in, minute 15:30, and it just really shows that language learning and being able to know Cherokee and understand it's more than just the language. It's a way to connect to your ancestors as the person describes. Um, it's a way to just understand how the culture works, and it's more than the language really. Um, and then, kind of what I also wanted to, like, point out was that Turkey history is way more than just the past couple 100 years. I know learning, in elementary school, I just thought it was something really recent, probably after, like, around the time, of the American Revolutionary War. We don't really learn more, beyond that. But, in May 22, they kind of describe how the history of Cherokees and just indigenous people goes back to almost 10,000 years ago, and Cherokee and, like, just indigenous languages are really the first actual, like, systems of writing that were formed on American land. So, these are languages that are actually from the land of America and not, like, English. Okay, yeah, since English is spoken, very set in a standardized manner, it isn't one of the languages that were actually formed and established in the land, of America. Cherokee and other indigenous languages were the ones that were actually formed, um, on American land. And, one of the people we spoke about in class, um, who are really important and key figures within, Cherokee history is Sequoyah, who was illiterate himself, but he was able to, create the Cherokee syllabary, as is described in mid 2330, and just demonstrates, like, the overall commitment and, like, the way of literacy for Cherokee people. It's different from standardized English and that kind of lifestyle tied with that. It's really they're really committed, and the language itself just shows you the language of history shows you that Cherokee people have a different way of learning and understanding things, and them being forced into, um, standardized English way and being similar to that, it kinda takes away from their history and identity. And that is seen today to the point where, they talk about the Tri-Cities Council and how there are only about 2,000 fluent tribes of speakers of Cherokee language, and because of that, there's a state of emergency declared because, um, Cherokee language is almost extinct, and most of that comes back from policies that are in place because of the government, especially the boarding schools and whatnot, and where, um, parents and whatnot, they don't really have a choice, um, for their children, and it kind of just ties back to that and how these assimilation policies kind of led to are leading to the near extinction of the Cherokee language. Um, but on a brighter note, I think that this is something that I personally find interesting within the documentary. Um, how there are actual schools now that are speaking, are teaching Cherokee as a language, especially the guy that is in the documentary near the beginning, who talks about how his father doesn't speak Cherokee, but he himself is learning Cherokee, and it's kind of a way for him to understand their perspective of his ancestors. And I feel like it's a good contrast to what British schools was, and now how schools also are being used or to preserve the language instead of erasing it, and how the youth are now being able to learn the language again. And I think personally that this is a good step to limit the extinction of the Cherokee language. And I just overall think that this is a good step, and this documentary overall shows how, you know, the forced assimilation policies, beginning at the youth, um, led to the almost near extinction of the Cherokee language, and it's prevalent today. And language, it really holds a lot of power, especially in regards to your culture, your identity, and being able to connect with um history and your ancestors as a whole. And I think this documentary really um shows you how education is important in regards to language as well, and how education can be used to erase the language, but it can also be used to preserve it. And to end off this podcast, one of the quotes that were displayed in the documentary, I really stuck onto. It was mentioned in minute 49:45, where it says that Cherokees never say goodbye. Um, they say only until we meet again. I feel like this really shows you, that the Cherokee people have a drive to continue, and they are people who are committed and driven, and language is evolving. And it just shows you that while the Cherokee are being suppressed by the government in order to assimilate to the standardized American lifestyle, um, uh, it, are people who will be driven to let the language stay alive, and the commitment um, is to continue and stay strong for the language. And overall, I personally really enjoyed the documentary. Um, I I learned a lot about Cherokee people, and how the history is beyond what is taught in schools. And it just goes to show you how education is um education is in part good, but it can also be used for bad. And language holds a lot of power, and um the Cherokee people really do hold a lot of power, and the extinction of Cherokee needs to be uh, stopped, and education is plays a role in that. And that's about it. Um, thank you all for listening. Bye.